Today on the podcast, we dig into the depths of Planet SR388. Welcome to Lore Party, the podcast that explores the stories, characters, and lore behind some of our favorite video game universes. I'm sitting here with Lawerence, and we're going to talk Metroid II, which I'm making him play for the very first time. Lawerence, how's it going?
It could be better.
To clarify, are you playing the original AM2R or the new one that's out?
I'm actually playing the original.
So we're going to do the exact same thing we did with the Boo. I realize I never introduced myself. I'm Neil, and I'm making everyone play through the Metroid franchise. So, what questions do you have so far? What do you want to know?
So I guess one of my first questions, playing Zero Mission, where is all of my stuff? Because I felt like this came right after the whole craziness in Zero Mission, and I was like a powerhouse. And then I start out, and I'm like, oh, hey, I'm like pretty stripped down here.
So that's like a staple of the Metroid franchise. I mean, really, Zelda's a good example too, any video game. Like, you're going to start off with absolutely nothing every single time, or start off with powers and some are stripped away. Obviously, the game wouldn't be as fun if you just started as a powerhouse. So there's two, like that being like the mechanical reason, obviously. But on like the timeline overall, the Metroid Prime series actually slots in between 1 and 2. So you could kind of speculate and give reason to, from Metroid Prime 3, like, your suit was based off of the intake of Phazon or whatever, the PED suit. And so you're going to give that up, or that's going to be stripped away or whatever. Now you're back in, like, your base power suit. But even in Metroid 2, you start off with, it's the base power suit, but you still have the long beam, so you don't have that pea shooter anymore. You start with the morph ball, you start with missiles, so you already have, like, probably the most beef out of any game to come into the planet.
I think the deeper I go into SR388, the more weapons I want that they're not giving me. But yeah.
Right. And it has to feel tough to go back because, like, as far as like the beams go, you can't stack any of those anymore. You can't switch them at will. You have to make a well-informed decision and grab whatever you think is best.
Yeah, and if you don't look at the instruction guide that like kind of explains like, hey, this is what like this weird artifact is going to give you, you're kind of just going in blind. Which is, it kind of takes me back to my childhood because like this was one of the first Game Boy games that I ever had.
Dot matrix with stereo sound, dude.
Oh my God, yeah. It's like, I'm 5 years old when I have this game, and I'm like playing through here. Like, you're 5 years old and you're playing a video game. You have no time whatsoever to look at like the instruction manual. You're just like, I'm playing a game where I'm a person in a suit and I'm shooting stuff.
Right, yeah, and you have the patience to deal with how excruciating that game can be. Everything's green and black and looks the same, but
oh God, yeah,
you're moving along just fine.
Right,
as a 5-year-old.
Right. Playing it as an adult is like, hey, I'm like a little bit more observant about what's going on, but it's still like just as crazy. So I like it because it it takes me back. I didn't realize that you were actually going deeper into the planet. And that, like,
right,
this planet is apparently in, like, some way tied to the Chozo?
Yes, big time. So, like, I'm sure, like, you've seen, like, the statues and stuff going around, right? Like, same as Super and Zero Mission and all that.
Right.
So, the statue, like, basically it's just culture, almost, at least in the case of SR388, just... The Chozo are a colonizing people, so they came down, they brought their art and their technology, they left statues and murals and what have you, and it's more or less just the proof that they were there. Like, they're colonizers, they were a proud warrior race of these avian people who turned to spiritualism and technology, and the statues are just the sacred art form found on their colonized planets, which is a lot compared to just like, oh, hey, here's the thing with the item, mechanically in the game.
Right. And it's interesting because it's just like, here's this like special upgrade or special artifact. And it's like, essentially like an powerful upgrade or some sort of, weapon or like something that you're using to survive, which I think is pretty cool. So one of my big questions about this game is, why are you on this planet, so to speak?
That is a good question for any Metroid game, honestly. So it's weird. This one has a little more going on to it than the other games did, and even in the original, like you just had to read the manual, and like the whole story's right there, and absolutely no one did. So, from top to bottom, I'll go like in the sense that like Zero Mission like was right before, Right. So there's a whole government, the Galactic Federation, and they have this research team. They have a bunch of scientists and stuff. It's advanced society, and they are on Planet SR388. And they find the Metroids. I'm going to assume that you have a rough understanding of what Metroids are, since you're spending the game hunting them down. Okay.
Right.
So they get one. They have a sample. They have a Metroid, and they're about to go take it back to their research station or headquarters or whatever. And the space pirates, who you don't see in this game, attack the researchers, and they steal the Metroids on their voyage home. And this kind of kicks off Zero Mission. They plan to replicate it. They plan to exploit their ability for the Metroids to drain life away, and they're going to turn it into a weapon to conquer the galaxy. So Zero Mission happens, go stop the space pirates, stop the Metroids, blah, 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 Mother Brain. And then the Metroid Prime series occurs. So while that's going down, a second expedition team, or rather a special squadron, goes to SR388 because they say, hey, we got to make sure there's no Metroids left on this planet. Like, these things are clearly a problem. And they manage to transmit some information that, hey, there are Metroids on the planet still. They're in the interior, and they will, quote, forever pose a devastating threat to the galaxy. And then next thing they know, contact is lost. End of transmission. That's all they have. So a search and rescue team goes out to find them, along with a special combat group just in case. And surprise, surprise, nobody comes back alive. So Samus Aran, experienced bounty hunter, experienced Metroid combatant, is once again hired by the Galactic Federation to exterminate the Metroid presence on this planet.
And so it's just like kind of like a controlled extinction, essentially.
Yeah. And so the deal is, why the Chozo are important as well, is they, I don't know if you know, they created the Metroids.
Oh, no.
Like, they're responsible for this. Yeah. The whole reason was there is this thing called the X-Parasite, which is basically more or less the villain in Metroid Fusion on the Game Boy Advance. And they were messing stuff up on SR388. And the Chozo were like, oh, man, these things will annihilate the universe by killing and assimilating creatures. Let's make something to kill them. Metroid in the Chozo language means ultimate warrior. So they're sending their, WWE ultimate, they're sending their ultimate warrior to combat what they perceive to be as the greatest threat. And that's kind of the folly of the Chozo as well, is that they just created this giant devastating monster to take care of another, and they had also created Mother Brain, your main threat in Zero Mission, and they just keep screwing up through their technology, thinking that they should be these observers and like sometimes interfere in the universe for being this prophetic spiritual race of bird folk.
Yeah, it's crazy too, like that you mention how they went from being a warrior race to like, a more spiritual race, but then they continue to create these things that like, essentially wreak havoc. And like they create these things that like that cause bigger problems instead of actively dealing with one threat. It's like they're accustomed to fighting fire with fire, essentially.
That's honestly how it seems. Yeah, that's a very good point. I didn't really put much thought into that myself before. Yeah, 100%, I'd say.
Yeah, it's like, hey, there's a there's a fire. Should we get some water? No, add more fire. I kind of seems like what they're accustomed to doing. But then again, I guess they created, they essentially created Samus,
Right. only because the space pirates like pretty much destroyed her home planet and ate her parents or whatever, and the only reason the space pirates went to Zevis is because of course, Metroid. So it is kind of full circle. You could kind of argue the Chozo are responsible for the death of Samus's parents and people, but who's to say? All conjecture.
And then they kind of just make up for it by making her into a super warrior.
Right, here's a suit. Please go clean up our mistakes.
Yeah, oh my god.
If you can lay waste to Mother Brain and exterminate the Metroids, that would be great. Sorry about that.
Wow.
Of course, though, they're not there to tell her that because they're all dead.
Yeah.
Or just not around.
That's actually really interesting to think about.
Yeah, and you don't encounter Chozo people at all in Metroid games, pretty much because they got so technologically, they peaked technologically, they did everything they could. They got super old. As a result of their prolonged age, they became sterile, so they're not reproducing. They have almost no need to, and they all just die. And it's almost all isolated incidents. They either just die of old age and never reproduced, space pirates killed them, or their creation, the Metroids, killed them. Right, so that was a little long-winded between the Chosen while you're there on the planet, but basically, you're cleaning up their mess. They messed up, and you gotta go do something about it, because of course now the entire galaxy is in jeopardy.
And it's funny, going back to I had no idea that that SR388 was even a Chozo colony or place where they lived and settled.
All you know when you land there is there's 39 Metroids and you have 30 missiles. That's all the information you have if you just fire up the game.
Yeah.
Which, speaking of just firing up the game, I don't think we said, where are you exactly? How many Metroids do you have left? What equipment do you have?
Oh my god. I have 27 Metroid that I have that are left. And I had the wave beam, and then I died, and I hadn't saved in a bit, so never could get back there and get the wave beam. So I'm still currently rocking the ice beam.
Yeah, that original game is so hard to navigate. You don't have a map, and again, everything is green and black unless you're playing the colored version of it, which still doesn't help because everything in that game looks the same.
Right, and then there are some secret passages, so there are times where I'm just aimlessly sliding into the wall in my morph ball, I need to see if I can go here. And you can't progress any further until you've killed a certain amount of Metroid. Then the lava starts to drain. And I've gotten to the point where the Metroids that I'm facing have evolved twice.
So twice. So what, the first one was the Alpha Metroid with the little horn, right? Then the Gamma. So now you're at the Zeta Metroid.
Oh no, I'm sorry. I'm at the Gamma Metroid. So I'm at the I don't know how much you know, but it gets worse. There are some real horrors to come. Well, the thing that was surprising was that the Gamma Metroids are kind of electrified in a sense.
Yes.
And so when I first encountered them too, I'm in some random part of this dungeon of horrors, and I'm just blasting through the wall. There's wall that you can shoot through, and then there's one that's in the center of it, and it just flies out, and I'm like, whoa, I've never seen this before. Oh my god. And it's there's little tiny bolts of electricity that you can see coming from it, and I'm just trying to shoot it.
It's horrifying. You just see them on the edge of the screen, and once you get close enough, they just start cruising at you.
And when they bounce, when you hit them with the missiles, and they bounce back, and it's oh my god, I can't aim.
Yeah. It's horrifying too, because the ice beam's in the game, and that's great. In original Metroid, or rather Zero Mission for you, the ice beam was your saving grace. You're gonna freeze those guys, you're gonna shatter them with some missiles, maybe super missiles, and everything's gonna be gravy. That doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, no.
Now you have this game where you need to hit their underbellies with missiles because they literally evolved right in front of your eyes. And that's the worst part of the game for me when it shows its age. You can't aim diagonally.
Oh, God.
Oh, man, Super Metroid really fixed that. But
gotta jump and go under.
It's ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah, and you were saying with the ice beam, that's what I thought. I was whoa, you get the ice beam, right at the beginning of the game. I'm they're serious about killing these Metroid. I'm bring it on now. Then you shoot it, and it's oh... this is not the ice beam I remember.
Pretty much, yeah. The beams they seem to work a little differently, and they bring it back in Samus Returns for 3DS, but they didn't have the same functions almost, where it was like, oh, I'll shoot through this room of enemies. Oh, like Plasma Beam will like shred through all the armor, and Ice Beam I can like do some real cool platforming stuff. Like, all the basic functions of those utilities are there, but they're not at the same scope as they are in the later games. But it's cool that it sets the foundation. Like, a lot of people don't even know that the Plasma Beam is in Metroid 2, and you have all that stuff once again because it's a giant Chozo colony where they left all this stuff that's compatible with your power suit. Like, there's a reason it's there. It's there for you.
Yes. And I will say, one thing that I can say about this game is that it does actually feel like you're on a mission, because like your mission, like, you know, the prime directive of your mission is to like exterminate this group of creatures that's, you know, is a potential threat, and you have to do that, and it gets progressively harder as you do that, as you would expect. And then in between you just experience some like, hey, here are some of the like, you know, local creatures that are inhabiting this planet that are kind of dangerous. So there's not that like all of a sudden here comes some like space pirate or some unrelated like, you know, enemy. It's like you're focused on the mission the entire time, and it's because the mission itself is grueling, and that's what I kind of appreciate about it. I feel like it, like, you kind of really experience the fatigue of,
like, you don't have a personal vendetta this time. There's no space pirates. There's no old home planet of Zebes. This is your first like real contract job where you have like no strings attached to it. Like,
right.
Obviously, you know, the space pirates shouldn't have the Metroids, but like that's the point of the mission. There's nothing more to it. Go exterminate.
Exactly.
Before I want to wrap up, I realized like you had brought up a very interesting point. I didn't realize you did. The smaller creatures, the non-Metroids, as you go deeper and deeper, just have you noticed that the more you go through the caverns, there's less enemies?
Yes. I've noticed that because, you know, I was using them to pretty much just grab like health from, and I've been having a harder time finding like, you know, health when I'm running out now.
So the reason you're seeing less and less is because these Metroids are sealed underground. They suck the life out of everything. They are predators on this planet. This is their planet. They're killing everything down there. And you're going deeper and deeper and deeper into that. It's only going to get more grueling until you pop out on the other end of the planet. That's all I can tell you right now at this point until you beat it.
Yeah, I'm worried about what I'm actually going to see next now that I know that I'm going to have like less resources for health, but more dangerous enemies. I don't know how this game ends because I never beat it as a kid. So that's why I'm like, oh crap, I don't know, like, where does this like, you know, end at?
This is actually the biggest story moment of the entire franchise, is the ending of this game. This really kicks everything off in the whole series. And I think for right now, that's a good ending point right here. Once you just burrow in deeper and deeper, I'm really hoping you're going to see what this is all about and how it affects everything.
Yeah, I'm excited to do that.
Well, that wraps it up for this episode. We want to thank you for tuning in and being part of the show. Be sure to connect with us on Twitter at lore_party and leave us a review on iTunes. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.